starting with the topic on learning. So first of all, we'll understand the concept and process of learning. So as we have already discussed in our previous chapter on human development, that how learning begins right from the time of birth, even before birth, even during the time of conception, and it goes on and on. And that we have understood how the learning goes on in the both in the growth and development process. So for the learning to occur, the two things are very important, which I mentioned here. One is the environment. Environment is connected with the nurturing process. And the second one is the innate disposition, that is the nature. So nature is more connected with the emotion and instinctual disposition. A person keeps learning across the stages of life. So when we learn, there are new constructs are being developed in our mind. So whenever we learn any new thing, there are neuro pathways that gets developed, and then sometimes we learn certain things, we unlearn, we relearn. So that is what we called as a constructing or reconstructing, or it's also called as a restructuring. So these are things that happens, the two factors that we cover under learning. Now let's look at a few of the definitions of learning. According to Gales, defines learning as a behavior modification, that all the behavior modification, all the changes that occur in the behavior, as a result of experience as a training. So as you know that as a child comes into your school, he comes in as a complete an empty slate, or with a less of learning, with less of experience. But as he goes through the process of learning, both training and experience in the school, right from the nursery section to 10th, there's a lot of amount of growth and the behavior modification that takes place. Then according to Crow and Crow, defined learning as the process of acquisition of learning habits and attitudes. So there is a process, acquisition of knowledge, habits, and attitude is being changed. Then according to E.A. Peel, learning can be described as a change in the individual which takes place as a result of environmental change. So again, it's covering up both the elements which I have explained before, the innate disposition and the environment, which are responsible for the learning. Now, we're going to look at the different theories given by different people. So according to B.F. Skinner, he came up with the theory of operant conditioning. Now, let's understand what conditioning is first of all. Operant conditioning is also known as with a different term called instrumental conditioning or instrumental learning. So B.F. Skinner came up with a theory that everything that we learn, every behavior is a learned behavior. Most of the things that we do, it's learned. So how conditioning is done? Like for example, a child, like for example, I give you example of my daughter. She's 2 years and 9 months, 9 months old. So when we taught her to brush the teeth, initially she was resisting, but again, when we kept on helping her do that, now she got conditioned. Her conditioning is now automatically she picks up the brush and she asks that she wants to brush. So there's a conditioning is done. So that's how the behaviors are learned, how we are conditioned. And B.F. Skinner said that the behavior, that any learning that takes place, it takes place because of two components, which it talks about. Either on reward are introduced to increase the behavior, and punishment is introduced to decrease the behavior. Now, for example, if you take the example of any child, even at your home, or if you look at in your school or in the classroom, the behavior that's being rewarded. Like for example, if the child is appreciated for a particular behavior, that behavior would keep on increasing. Even if he's doing the wrong thing, he'll keep on increasing. But if you punish, or if you say no to the child, that behavior continues to decrease. All right. So he came up with the two components, reinforcement and punishment. So again, reinforcement and punishment are divided into two different categories. There is a positive reinforcement and there is a negative reinforcement, and there is a positive punishment and there is a negative punishment. Now let's look at the reinforcement, the reward part of it. Now, for example, if the child is doing something good, you're adding something valuable, desirable. Yeah, like you're giving him a star, so giving him a star or giving something that he loves doing it, that is a reward which would kind of help that behavior to increase. Now second is a negative reinforcement. So what is negative reinforcement? So avoid something unpleasant, and so you remove, you tell if something is unpleasant, you remove it, so that the desired behavior is acquired, and then when we come to punishment, punishment is, if you look at the positive punishment, adding something unpleasant, so when you add something unpleasant, like for example, uh, positive punishment, like for example, the child is misbehaving with you, when the child is misbehaving with you, so there is a technique called timeout technique. Timeout technique is called, you tell the child that, like you see the picture here, you tell the child that for next 5 minutes you will be just looking in that corner, you are not going to look anywhere else, so you are given the timeout, so the child got timeout. So that's called, you are adding the unpleasant stimuli, so that he realizes his mistake, so that the behavior does not occur again, and again, here you add something to remove the behavior. And secondly, you remove something valuable. Like for example, that she loves playing with a doll. When she is misbehaving, you take away the rewards. Maybe she loves, her favorite toy, favorite gadget is taken away, as a punishment, so that she does not repeat that behavior. So both these components are very much used as a reinforcement, is looked at as a reward, and punishment again, and both the sections are, both goes as a positive and a negative. So is it clear? Is the theory clear, B.F. Skinner? Okay. So next theory is given by Albert Bandura, Albert Bandura's theory of learning. So he came up with the component on that, the two components which are responsible for any learning to take place, personal factors like cognitive, to do with your thinking, logical, problem solving, affective, your feeling, and biological events. And the second one is the environmental factors. So Albert Bandura came up with uh, his entire theory is based on these two components, which are based on observation learning, which is imitation and learning. So according to Albert Bandura, most of the behavior the child is having, he has learned it by imitating other people or by modeling them. Like for example, you see here, so like for example, I can again give the example of my daughter, so there's a lot of disturbance coming from somebody, so could you please mute? There's somebody talking, or there's disturbance coming from someone. Dr. Lalit, could you please mute everyone?
Okay, sure.
Someone is, they're talking.
आप अपना अनम्यूट कर लो, शंबिल आप अनम्यूट कर लीजिए. हाँ.
Yes, I did that. So according to, I was giving the example of imitation and modeling, how the imitation and modeling works. For example, I again give the example of my daughter. Like for example, I take online classes. So I am teaching a lot of master students of psychology across India. And so when I always start the class by greeting everyone, hello everyone. So sometime my daughter walks in my office here and she looks at me, and yeah, after that, she imitates me telling the same thing, hello everyone. So the kind of the children always picks up, because this is things that I'm experiencing nowadays, this imitation and modeling. So me and my wife are very particular about, what kind of words we got to speak, what are kind of words. Now, for example, we spend a lot of time in prayer morning and evening. So we have particular time. So when we use certain words in prayer, we use certain songs, she picks up exactly as it is. That's called the imitation and modeling. So that's why, as a teacher, I would say that teacher is a model in the class. So everything that teacher does, the children intend to model or imitate, or whatever parents are doing, that the children tend to imitate or model. So he came up with that everything, all the behavior the children have is the result of modeling and imitation learning. It's also known as a social learning theory. All right. So is it clear? So shall we proceed? All right. Great. So now the third person, the Kohlers came up with another theory that's called the insight learning. So insight learning refers to a certain realization of a solution of a problem. Sometimes we get an intuition or an insight of doing something. So after a period of manipulation of aspects of a problem for a while, like for example here, there was an experiment that was done on the chimpanzee called Sultan. So he was caged with food and a lot of other objects in the room. So they were bananas were hanged on the top, and there were a lot of objects were put in the room. So so he was doing the trial and error, kind of using the multiple objects, like through some manipulation of these objects, which got Sultan nowhere. He seems to suddenly figure out that the stick could be the joint to get the food. Now, if you look at here, this picture, this is a theory of insight learning. So there are many objects which are available in the room. There are boxes available, and then there's a stick. Then finally, he kept the one box over the another. First he tried take just take without the box. Then he put the one box, third box, still he could not reach. Then finally he realized there is another object lying in the room, that stick. So he could take the bananas with the help of the stick. So that means after doing everything, he suddenly got the insight, okay, this is an object that could have been useful for this. Fine. So this is called the insight learning, where you try various means and suddenly you get the insight. Like for example, sometimes you are working on a project, you have tried all your means, and you suddenly get an insight, oh my god, this is something I think it will work, and actually it works out. So is it clear, the insight learning? Now with the gag, this is the last one, the Gagne's, this is the Gagne is the last person in this theory, Gagne's hierarchy of learning. So Gagne came with the 9 events which are responsible for a learning to take place. For example, the first stage is the gaining attention. You gain attention. Second, informing the learner of the about of the object about which the learning is being done. And third, stimulating recall of the prior knowledge. Like for example, today when I discussed when I started teaching you the learning topic, we reconnected with our human development topic, and then stimulating the recall of the prior knowledge, presenting the information what I got to present now, and then providing the guidance and eliciting the performance. Seventh is providing the feedback on the same, and eighth is assessing performance, and ninth is enhancing retention and transfer. So these are the 9 events a person goes through. This is a hierarchy of learning which the Robert Gagne has come up with, and he further explains it in the hierarchy form, where he has divided the entire 9 events into various into 2 different categories. Like for example, the signal learning, signal learning, then the stimulus, there's a response learning, then the psychomotor connection learning, there's a verbal association learning. So the first 4 are mainly connected with the more of the behavioral aspects of the learning, which more to do with the behavior. And the another remaining one, multiple discrimination of learning, and the concept learning, principle learning, and the ultimately doing the problem solving, the peak of the triangle. So more of the cognitive work which is done on the top part of it. So this is how the Gagne's theory, he comes up with the theory of hierarchy of learning. So there are 9 events. There are Gagne's 9 events of instruction. There are different instructions given here. Like for example, the events of instruction: gain attention. What do you do in the gain attention? Present a dilemma, analogy, or a video. Information learning objects: list clear the learning outcomes, questions, or the challenges you explain about. And then you stimulate recall prior knowledge, explain how prior knowledge relates to new topic, and initiate discussion, and the pre-testing is done. And in the fourth one, present a new content, explaining or example or stimulation has been done. And in the fifth one, provide guidance. You do guidance through the guidelines, so the checklist or the group discussion, the guidance has been done. Then provide, then comes assessment part. Assessment part, what we do the provide the learning activities, provide feedback, assess learning, check your understanding, self peer facilitator assessment, practical or e-portfolio quiz, all those things, assessment part is done. Okay, and then enhance retention and transfer. Then finally summarize and conclude the topic and provide the additional resources. So there is the introduction phase, there is a content phase, there is the assessment phase, and then the summary, and then finally it reaches to the problem solving part of it. Clear? So with this, we are done with the topic on learning.